Welcome everybody to another episode of Real Reactions. I'm joined with my co-host CJ, and we just finished watching The Batman. Before we get into it, this movie is 3 hours long. That being said, we got into the theater at 7. Well, the movie started at 7, and it ended at around 10:01 on the dot. We waited until after the credit scene because apparently there was supposed to be something at the end.
Don't waste your time.
Yeah, apparently it's not even a thing. We waited and well, we'll get into that. Anyway, there is going to be a midpoint in this video where I will have on the very bottom of the screen, and I will say it, that there's spoilers ahead. But before that, we just want to talk about a little bit of the things that I noticed.
Snape kills Dumbledore.
That too. So, got my phone, I took some notes. Probably not the best thing to do in the theater, but hey, I wanted to make a good video for you guys, so bear with me on that.
Too distracting.
This is the first time I've seen a movie that I can remember that it was like an advanced screening that wasn't really publicized. Yeah. Because a little bit of a backstory for this, I knew I wanted to see the movie, especially after hearing all the reviews being so highly regarded as far as Rotten Tomatoes and everything else goes. I knew that I wanted to see it sooner rather than later. So I called CJ and told him, you guys know him, he hates DC and also Batman by himself.
Especially Batman.
Especially Batman. So I called him and I was like, hey man, I really want to make this video. I want to make it sooner rather than later, obviously, so you guys can enjoy it before or after you see the movie. And the earliest showing, to my knowledge, was Thursday. Well, apparently, there's a theater here in close to where I live in Destin, Florida, that showed a screening tonight, which is Wednesday. So I was like, you know what, let's get the tickets. They were about $18, and I think that was because it was this special premiere. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you saw that I took a photo of the outside of the theater, and it had this like really pretty Dolby surround sound little intro, thing, and the seats were incredible. They were legit recliners. You never have to worry about somebody walking in front of you and blocking the movie because of the way the stadium seating is. It's insane. Before I even saw the movie, when I saw the trailer way back whenever it was originally released before COVID, I had an automatic, like, cautious feeling towards it. The reason why, obviously, Robert Pattinson hasn't really done anything Batman related as far as recent years goes. I don't think he's done dramatic roles and really impacted us with like The Lighthouse and stuff like that. But normally he's either not been doing anything or been doing stuff completely, not Batman. So I was kind of reserved, and I was worried because we had just gotten the Suicide Squad and we had gotten the Justice League. We knew that we were going to get the Snyder Cut, and we're like, well, Ben Affleck's the new Batman, so what's this with, and then of course I talked off camera about maybe it has something to do with Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. So I was a little apprehensive beforehand, and then as it got closer to the release, I kept watching the trailers and reading about how him and Commissioner Gordon were really tight-knit. It reminded me of the animated series and how that felt, where he kept talking to Gordon. He spoke to Gordon more than he spoke to Alfred, and it had that feel. And also the fighting, like when he would, like, in the trailer, he was like breaking people's bones essentially as he was fighting them. It wasn't as dramatic in the movie, I don't think, because the trailer was pretty impactful.
But then again, the movie was 3 hours long, and it dragged on, so every time there was any like violence, it was few and far between. Because I think the action scenes, they weren't bad by any means.
Mm-hmm. I was confused about the whole Affleck thing, especially in the beginning. So in the very beginning, not of the movie, of watching it in the theater or whatever, it may be different if you guys are watching this after having seen it yourself. It may have been different for you, but for us, they showed a bunch of DC trailers and this, like, showing us that The Rock was Black Adam and showing us that the Aquaman was still a thing, and Ezra Miller was still the Flash. And they had this one montage part where it basically showed like the movies, like boom 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 coming out for DC, and it started with The Batman, which is what we saw, and then the sequel to Aquaman, The Flash, Black Adam, and then something else. And then we got to see like a Hawkeye preview, or a Hawkman preview, sorry. So I was like, wait a minute, are they just deleting Affleck as Batman? Because it doesn't make sense if Aquaman and The Flash are not, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't think it was tying them together at all. I think it was just saying these are our upcoming projects, and it was like, it also specifically said only in theaters. So I think it was just a thing to get you drummed up about like the they don't call it the multiverse, right? But
like extended universe or whatever it is.
Universe. Just their movies. I think it was just trying to get you excited for them. We've seen those for Marvel too. Like they did the one big trailer saying it will have a little clip from Hawkeye. It'll have a little clip from Avengers, and Shang-Chi was one of them. You remember they did the same thing for Marvel.
After seeing that, I went into it going, try not to overthink it. Of course, I didn't have enough time to make sense of it because the movie immediately started. That was something that we noticed.
Yeah. I imagine the trailers would have been better than the movie itself, so I was a little disappointed when there wasn't any.
Wow. Okay, so I just want to say I'm really happy. I've said this in the past when CJ and I have done podcast episodes where our opinions are very different with things about DC especially, and it serves as it's a natural contrast that we're not trying to play both sides against the middle. We actually feel this way about what we talk about. I'm just going to get my opinions out of the way. That's the best way to put it. So I did not really care for the cowl. His cowl was very, it didn't go well with his face. Robert Pattinson has a very square jaw, and the cowl kind of ends back this way, so it doesn't look good. It just looks like he has a Zorro bandana on, and his ears are just pulled back. It just looked, his ears, not the bad ears. The front should have come a little bit further down this way and then squared out here to kind of hide his cheekbones, because it also made it to where, and this movie I don't think was supposed to have that cheesy tone of, Clark Kent just puts on glasses and all of a sudden he's not Superman anymore. So it looked like Robert Pattinson. At least with Christian Bale, I kind of didn't see Christian Bale in the cowl.
I mean, I didn't really see Robert Pattinson with the cowl. I think the cowl looks stupid, period. Batman's got a dumbass costume. It doesn't make any sense.
All right. Also, the Batmobile, I loved in the trailer. You got to see that it was a regular car.
Yeah.
Because this movie overall feels like
I actually did like that.
Yeah.
I've seen Dark Knight. Mm-hmm. I didn't see Batman Begins, I don't think, but I saw Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, and I hated the Batmobile. I was like, that's just super extravagant. It's stupid.
Like a baby tank.
Yeah. Yeah. This one was actually pretty cool. I'll say that the car was decent.
Yeah.
And he didn't use it all the time either. And he was riding around a motorcycle at the time, and I liked the motorcycle too. It wasn't as overt.
Yeah.
And
it was a little bit more practical too because this movie's pacing was so fast. Batman it felt like he had barely enough time to think about what was going on. He was always in a hasty, he had to run. He was always running after the problem or the person. Mm-hmm. So the Batmobile was cool that it would lend it to a more realistic Batman. The fights were very practical.
Yeah.
He didn't fly around. He did it maybe once, but he did it we'll get to that. And just the look overall, it felt like it was they were really trying to tell the story of a guy in a costume with a lot of money being a vigilante.
All the technology you see in the film was stuff that I could see realistically being a thing in the next 5 years. There's one thing that's a little far-fetched.
Oh yeah. We'll get to that. The cinematography for this movie, I actually had to look up at one point because just for giggles, how tall Robert Pattinson was. For some reason, I thought he was a little shorter, maybe 5'9", 5'10". He's 6'1" apparently, because the cinematography, especially in the first act and maybe even part of the second act, he looked a lot. It looked like they were compensating for him being short. Because already the co-stars, the guy who played Commissioner Gordon, a shorter guy, Selena Kyle, shorter person. Most of the cops were short guys. So whenever Robert Pattinson was on screen, he kind of had that Batman the Arkham video games, that stature of this hulking dude over these people.
Well, hulking might be a stretch.
Height-wise, not
height-wise.
Yeah, height-wise. That's what I meant. The person who was in charge of the cinematography, I think, had a very stylistic approach. Everything else seems to be more that I have written down here seems to be more on the spoiler territory. So,
all right. So from this point forward, spoiler alert.
Those of you, this should be airing on Thursday of the week of the movie's release, and it's definitely not going to be probably available for a lot of people. And then you also probably have your jobs to think about in your school and everything, so you might not get to see the movie immediately. I would love for you to watch our review on the movie, which is the rest of this video, but maybe like CJ said, pause it, come back to it, and that way we don't ruin it for you. So here we go. From now on, you've been warned. This is the second warning, final warning. Spoilers ahead. The movie felt a lot in the very beginning.
The
movie felt a lot like the Tim Burton setting. It was raining all the damn time, dude.
Tim Burton. Is that the George Clooney one?
No, that's the Michael Keaton. No, the originals. The one where Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman and Danny DeVito as Penguin. Jack Nicholson as the Joker.
Okay. Yeah.
It was raining all the time.
There's too many Batman movies. I mean, one is too many, but there's way too many.
All right. Um, I'm just trying to continue with my thoughts, having CJ, for all intents and purposes, my best friend, laughing at one of my childhood heroes. You know, he had the grease paint, you know, and from the photos and the stills, there's memes all over the internet already of them saying that he's like the manager at the Hot Topic or the emo Batman. For the most part, I could appreciate the emo Batman because that was probably one of my biggest negatives. It was hard to differentiate him from Bruce Wayne and Batman. He was the same. He carried himself, the mannerisms, the facial expressions. It was Robert Pattinson, like if someone killed his dog, and like every scene, he was just like, he had like his eyes would move more than his face.
Boy looked dirty.
He was very filthy. He did have the grease paint because that's something that you never see. You actually see Christian Bale take his helmet off,
and it's just gone.
And it's just gone. He talks to Michael Caine, who played Alfred, and he's just like, you know, and even with his voice, which we all know, the laryngitis voice, he basically, like, there's a scene, I forget which, I think it was in The Dark Knight, where he sees Alfred and he's like, we gotta be careful, because this city's in trouble. And anyway, Alfred, I need to ask you a question. And all of a sudden, the grease paint's gone, the voice is back to being a normal voice, and I was like, okay, that pulls me out of it a little bit. Because let's be honest, until this movie, most Batman movies, not counting the Nolan trilogy, were pretty campy and pretty comic booky and, you know...
bad.
Okay, bad, sure. And then the Nolan movies were like, let's make it to where Batman was a real guy. So now it's like more of that, which I enjoy. There was a very specific... There's two scenes. It happens twice because they go to the same place.
Yeah.
The club.
Yeah.
It felt... I know you haven't seen Blade yet. Don't worry, guys. It's coming. For those of you who have seen Blade, especially the first one and the second one, the club, because they both have club scenes, it felt like that. The lighting. Another thing, not to cut myself off, but if you have like, what is it, narcolepsy, or you're prone to seizures, you might want to be careful. Epilepsy, thank you. You might want to be careful with this movie. This movie has a lot of strobing lights, a lot of... I
didn't think it was too bad.
Well, maybe it was because it was IMAX, I don't know, but there were a lot of scenes where the cops were like opening doors in like... not first person, but basically like if we were the room that they were entering, and they would shine the light right in the lens of the camera, and I was like,
that's not the same thing. It's more for like flashing lights, like repeatedly.
I guess. Well, yeah. I guess so. Well, I mean, that happened a little too, but not as intense. I guess that's true.
I mean, I'm not an expert by any means, but I think you'd be fine if you were epileptic.
so that it just felt a lot like, almost even like Batman Beyond, because it was very dark, but not dark like Ninja Assassin dark, where you can't see the movie. For those of you that don't know, this movie has a very popular villain among Batman fans in the Riddler. To me, it didn't feel like the Riddler at all.
I didn't think so either.
I thought it was more of like a Joker, a lot like Heath Ledger's Joker.
It was like, think like the Joker character, not as eccentric, but with the Riddler's like MO, you know?
He made it to where it was hard to trust anyone, if you were Batman or if you were Jim Gordon. The cops didn't know who were dirty cops, who were crooked cops, who were clean cops. Gordon was super confused. Batman was trying to like make sure that civilians weren't hurt, and the law enforcement wasn't hurt, and also trying to put up with all the mean looks and stuff that the cops and the people would give him because he's a vigilante. That was very reminiscent of The Dark Knight.
Dude, Commissioner Gordon looked like Jordan Peele in 20 years.
Like, he kind of did.
At first, I thought it was Jordan Peele. At the first glance, when he's like kind of come into frame, and then you get a closer look, I was like, I even said to you, I don't think you heard me, I was like, is that Jordan Peele? And they got close, I was like, oh, no, it's not. Not at all.
Yeah,
that would have been hilarious.
I think he was in one of the Hunger Game movies. He was probably, I think he was one of the tributes from one of the school. I'm almost positive
since I've seen it, so
I'm gonna leave this in the video regardless, even if I'm dead wrong. I really think he was in those movies, but it was a good cast, I think. A good casting choice. He felt like he was a cop. He had a little bit of a dumbfounded, almost like he was late to the party on every situation. Like when Batman was, I mean, I know it's Batman, but when he was solving the crime and he was solving the puzzles, Jim was kind of like the guy in the corner going, sure, yeah, it's if you say so. And Batman was pretty much the Batman that was from the animated series, as far as he answered riddles like on command. He, was very witty, very sharp. And also because of Robert Pattinson's, like, the sense of him being so young, I think he might even be the youngest Batman on screen. It was easy to not think about that, if that makes sense. I never really was in there going, wow, it's Robert Pattinson, please. Like, and he definitely had a somber tone, but it was a little too much almost for me. I feel like he was a little too depressed.
Well, yeah.
Especially since he's been Batman for a while, right?
Yeah, well, I think this is supposed to be early in his days as Batman. I think somebody said that. I actually kind of liked the portrayal of Bruce Wayne compared to any other Batman content I've seen.
Interesting.
Because not necessarily it was superior, but it was just different. Because you typically see him as this, like, not really Tony Stark-esque character. He's so two-dimensional. He's such a boring character.
Okay.
But normally he's like this billionaire and he knows it, and he's like, prim and proper when he's Bruce Wayne.
Right.
From what I've seen, he's like, even in the Dark Knight, he's at these big parties or whatever.
Sure.
And this version of him, he's like a hermit basically, and he stays at home and he doesn't go out. And like, there's a whole big deal when he goes to that funeral in the movie.
Right.
Like, oh, this is like the first time he like really did anything public in years.
Yeah.
So I like to see a different take on that, and it was more interesting.
Yeah.
It gave him a little bit of depth on a character that usually has none.
I agree with a little bit. A little bit. I can appreciate anyone who says, oh, he's the emo Batman. Andy Serkis played Alfred. I thought we were going to get more of that, and that it would kind of play off a little bit, and there would be a little bit of a character growth in Bruce. I don't think there was. Again, as I said, this is the first time I watched it. CJ's pretty set in stone that he didn't think there was any character development at all for Batman. But as far as like the best Bruce Wayne, I think he's probably the better Batman, because his Bruce Wayne was so, like...
They're the same character.
I kind of tend to see, because if you think about it, I know you don't like any of the movies, but I've said it many times, like, Christian Bale, Batman, and Bruce Wayne are very different. He one of them is the look at the money, the other one is swear to me, and he's angry all the time, and he's down to 11, and...
But this one seemed like it was the same character.
Yes, exactly.
Which I think is a good thing.
But at the same time, it kind of limits the IQ of the rest of the people involved. So he goes to this club, which is basically where at first he thinks it's the Penguin, because the Penguin's in the movie, if you didn't know. Then he finds out it's not. It's, Falcone or Falcone, because in this movie they call him Falcone, even though, if memory serves, they've always pronounced the E in Falcone, but I guess potato. And he realizes as he's going in and questioning and stuff that it's not who he thinks it is, and he has to go back to the drawing board and blah, 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 but it's the same camera angle. And at one point he goes in as Batman, and he's standing there, and the guy comes out and he's like, what do you want? Do you know who this is? Or do you know who I am? And he's like, do you know who I am? And then he goes in, breaks the guy's nose, gets in, whatever. Then he goes in at one point as Bruce to talk to Falcone or Falcone.
Yeah.
And he's standing the same way. He's just like, he has this like sidestep where he's just like, he doesn't want to look anyone in the eye until he absolutely has to. And I'm like, all right, guy, you get it. As Batman, you're supposed to be this shadow. You're supposed to be this, like, vengeance, as he calls himself in the movie. But as Bruce, you're supposed to play up the facade that you're either a depressed orphan, which is, I guess, the angle he was going for, or this billionaire playboy philanthropist, who's not Tony Stark. You're probably getting upset at me, but...
Definitely not Tony Stark.
Like, come on, guys, it's obviously the same guy. And then at one point, I forget what character it was, I thought that they had actually figured it out, and they didn't.
You're talking about the end, right?
No, I'm talking about, I think it was Gordon at one point. He kind of looks at him, and then he like stares at him, and then he's like... Wait a minute.
It seems like in every movie, he's horrible at hiding his identity. It's kind of dumb that he hides it anyways.
Well, I think that's a topic for another video.
Comic books have evolved so much, and they've gotten away from the superhero hiding their identity. I mean, you see it in Marvel, the only character that really is hiding their identity is Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And when he reveals it, it's a huge issue. But the thing is, he is a poor kid. He does have all the Stark tech now, but well, not now, of course. That's a whole different topic. But
right.
He had all the Stark tech, but he was still some kid, and he wanted to protect his Aunt May, he wanted to protect his friends. He didn't want to put them at risk.
And he wanted to go to school and live a normal life. Yeah.
He had a motive to hide all that.
Right.
But then you flip it over, and you have a character like Superman. Like, why hide your identity?
Well,
dumb.
You can say, like, for Lois's benefit, or that kind of thing.
But it's Superman. He can stop anything that they're gonna do to Lois.
Yeah.
And then Batman might as well be Superman, but without powers.
It's the brain-brawn dynamic.
Make him effectively as powerful as Superman without actually doing it. It's so stupid.
This was actually the only Batman movie that I think showed him as a detective. The rest of the movies,
I did like that, actually.
Yeah, they showed him more as a like forensics analyst, like that one part with, or ballistics analyst or whatever, whenever Christian Bale was trying to figure out what caliber that gun was that shot whatever it was, and he's like, he recreates the gun and he has it shoot 4 center blocks, if you guys remember the scene from The Dark Knight or whatever, and he's trying to, I think it was Dark Knight anyway.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, he actually he has Alfred like put up this minigun that's on this like gimbal, and it's just like boom, and then it comes on this side, boom, and it shoots, and he starts analyzing the bullets, and he sees that the bullet was actually this like whatever. That was like the only Christian Bale detective work that I remember from those movies.
Oh yeah, because the bullet, it didn't like open up.
Right.
It was
like a spiral or something.
Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah.
But in this movie, it's like, you know, he of course, sure, he uses his what I call the bat console, where he has all the screens and stuff. You know, he prints out.
He's not super reliant on it, though.
Yeah, he's more of like clues and blood patterns and trajectory and stuff. And then of course, I think it's time, since we're in the spoiler part, where we talk about the thing that maybe we're not really quite there yet, the contact lenses.
Yeah, that's the one tactic. I thought it was really a cool concept.
I did too.
He has, if you haven't seen it and you didn't care about spoilers, he's got these contact lenses that he wears, and you see it. Sorry, I have to sneeze. So yeah, he has these contact lenses that records everything he sees. Effectively, I can't remember exactly what happened, but he does something, and you don't know he's wearing them. And then the first time he goes to like the Batcave, he takes them out, and you're like, wait, what is that? And then he puts them in the computer, and you see he can re-watch all the stuff he saw.
It's basically like the equivalent of like a police body cam, but I don't think he uses it for in case he ends up in court. I think he uses it for like, I want to.
He wants to look at details. You know, he doesn't just glance at stuff. He looks at it and studies it, and then looks away. Yeah. And I don't know if they were just trying to make that for the character, or they were trying to keep that continuity, like he's using his lenses right now, because they're not overt. You can't tell. He's just looking. Right. So like, he'll look and study something, and again, it happens before it even reveals that he's wearing the contacts, and later you see, oh, that's why he stares at something, and they even kind of really show it. He gives the contacts to Catwoman, and has her go through the club, and she wears them, and she does that. She'll glance and then look away. He goes, no, I need you to look, like get a good study, because it had to do like facial like scanning to see who certain people were. I thought that was actually a cool concept, and they paid a lot of good attention to detail in it.
Yes, as you said, the contacts, you couldn't tell that the person was wearing them. At one point, Selena was like super conscious of it, because she was like, "You sure they can't see these on, you know, in my eyes?" And he's like, "No, they can't." Basically, had like a Dodge Charger or some sort of American muscle car that was highly augmented with no trunk. It basically housed this giant like twin ion engine, you know, and
like a jet engine.
And he basically had, it was all decked out, bulletproof out the wazoo, right? Probably a wide body kit. He had a bunch of, you know, suspension and all that kind of thing. The movie had a little bit of humor sprinkled in. 2 scenes in particular that made me laugh pretty, and I don't mean laugh like in an excitement. I mean laugh because it was funny. It was when he tried to drive the car the first time, he stalled out.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, he stalls out. So like he turns the car on, you get the engine's going, the blue flame's about to fly out, and then all of a sudden it just goes, and then the lights turn off. Me and the guy to my left we lost it. We laughed like hysterically at it, and so I'm almost positive. Those of you, if you've seen the movie, let me know in the comments. Did he stall out or not?
At first, when it happened, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, he stalled out. Then I was like, but that doesn't really, like, he's driven this before, right? Like, how he stall out?
Well, no, because
like whatever.
Remember, he like the very first act, every time they showed him at the console, either the car was completely covered up, or at one scene he had like the entire engine was taken apart, even down to the spark plugs. It's like maybe he was trying to, I mean, maybe, who knows? But that part made me laugh. The other part was when there's a scene where he punches Gordon in the face because the cops hate him. The cops think that he is sticking his nose where he doesn't belong. He's not a cop. You know, he's a freak in a suit, and he should let the cops do their job, that kind of thing. Well, they get into this tussle, and he gets knocked out pretty bad. Well, the cops take his body back to the headquarters or the holding cell or something. They put him in this cage, this interrogation room, essentially. And there's like maybe 40, that's nothing. This movie had an abundance amount of cops. Like, cops were everywhere. They were a dime a dozen in this movie.
Nothing like actual New York City.
Exactly. I know it's Gotham, but obviously it's New York.
It's New York City.
Finally, one of them's just like, just take his mask off. And he magically, plot device, comes to at that moment, gets up, you know, takes him off of him. Of course, Jim's trying to tell him not to fight the cops. And One of them specifically is like, you know, goes back and tries to take the cowl off again.
Oh, that had to be when I went to go take a piss.
Oh.
So I was like, I don't remember that.
And so what ends up happening is Jim takes a hold of Batman and puts him against the wall, and he's just like, you know, this is, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know? And I guess the acting commissioner, because the original one gets killed, is like, you know, you're sticking your neck out for this guy. And then he's like, listen, I will gain control, whatever. And then he asks the superior, who I guess is the acting commissioner, give me the room. Not to mention the guy who played the replacement commissioner sounded just like what's his name, Marlon Brando from The Godfather. He was just like, you mean to tell me you're gonna let him go? And I was like, okay, that's very distracting. But anyway, so they give him the room, and it's just the commissioner dude, Batman, and Gordon. Luna, please don't hit the camera. He goes, all right, you're gonna have to hit me and then run, or something to that effect. And Batman's like, all right. So they're talking. The cops are watching them talk from like a room away. And then Batman just gives them this right cross, bro. Jim goes down. Batman runs out. The cops are like, hey, running after him. And then Jim apparently, you know, obviously he's okay. He was in on it. Meets up with Batman on the roof of where the bat signal is. Batman is like, you know, in the shadows like he does. He comes out and Jim's like, man, you could have pulled that punch. And he's like, I did. And like, for some reason, I thought that was really funny because, you know, it's not supposed to be, but it was like, you know, Batman's version of humor. And because he's such a dark, somber Batman, it doesn't take much, right? And then, of course, there were a couple of, like, scenes that got you pumping, or got me pumping. CJ was pretty much like, you know, right?
I was yawning.
Yeah. When you actually, that wasn't the scene. I don't think that was the scene where you went to the bathroom. I think you missed him jumping off the roof of a building in a squirrel. He, like, basically he zips up his cape, like he wraps it around his body, zips it up, and then he jumps out, like he jumps off of this, like, skyscraper, and like a flying squirrel just like dives down. And
I missed that.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
glad I missed that, because that sounds horrible.
Well, buddy, he hits the freaking underpass or whatever and eats total shit. Like he like barrel rolls, dude.
I saw the one where he takes the explosion.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's, I assume, when he got knocked out and they took him to the station, right?
Yes, that was.
So I missed that, and I'm guessing when he left the station, he must have jumped off and glided.
Yeah, he did.
So that's why. Yeah, so I missed that whole section.
Stands up almost immediately, and he's just like, oh, cracks his neck, and he just like walks away. And I'm like, buddy, I don't know if that's how that would play out, but okay. He's definitely a detective. He does a lot of work as Bruce Wayne. You see him more as Bruce. Actually, towards the end, he gets the 50-50 split, but in the very first act and bleeding into the second act, he's more Bruce Wayne doing detective work as Batman doing detective work. It was very, very, like, nothing was an accident. And even Batman says it at one point. He goes, did he make a mistake? And Batman's like, no, he doesn't make mistakes.
Yeah.
And it worked, because he lets himself get caught, and, you know, quite literally, like, foreshadowing in a way, because he tells Batman, the light will show the truth, blah, blah, blah. I'll be in the, you know, here, and Batman saw him. And Batman obviously isn't stupid. He's supposed to be the world's greatest detective. So the fact that the Riddler is almost like playing both sides and like corralling him almost, you know, and he's in a diner. And Batman goes, and of course the cinematography was great in that scene, because you see him through the window, and of course the rain and everything, and he just smiles at him, and then like vibes with him, almost like the Joker did, where he's like, you know, I don't want to kill you, you know. And then once Batman's like, we're nothing alike, we're not, you know, we may have both been orphans, but we're not anything alike.
The Riddler, once they have him caught and the Batman goes to see him, the Riddler starts talking like he knows Batman as Bruce Wayne.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But then he says something I don't think he does know.
No. Well,
because he said something along the lines of like, he says he, essentially, I think he said something towards the end, like, you could, it almost changed the tension too. In the way I was seeing it, he's going back and forth, and you see Batman getting riled up, like he's realizing, oh, he knows my identity, and then he says something that gives away that he doesn't, and he says something like, oh yeah, he deserved to die, or something like that, or that's not what he says, but it's something along those lines, to where. And you can even almost see the change in Batman's like mood, in like stature. Is like he realizes, oh, he doesn't know who I am.
I mean, that could be true. Obviously, yeah. As I said, I'm gonna rewatch it. But I took it because I remember a distinct detail when they bust him and they find his apartment or whatever that has all his gadgets and his broken up cell phones and the way he makes the bombs and everything.
It's like, I know who you are.
Yeah, and it has like a picture of Bruce with his eyes like blacked out. And then a picture of Batman, and then it says, I know who you really are, or something like that. So, in my opinion, I was like, maybe he knows, because normally, like even with other movies where they say we're both the same, and the hero goes, no, we're not. The villain drops the mic drop. Yes, your real name is so and so.
Yeah.
So it could be either way. Let us know again what you guys think in the comments.
It was kind of vague, and another thing was he didn't say how he knew.
Yeah.
And usually a villain for that kind of thing would say, I know you're this person because of X, and that didn't happen.
Right. And there was a lot of not necessarily misdirection, but there was a lot of like, oh, it's this person's fault. And then Batman's like, all right, well, I'm going to go after that person. And then collateral damage, Alfred gets, a package that was intended for Bruce Wayne.
Well, another thing is that happened, but it happened, it was almost like a flashback when we were watching him get...
Yeah, because it was like an hour earlier or something.
He finally gets a hold of her, and she said, yeah, it happened an hour ago.
Right.
And it was like, it almost made it happen, like he was racing to get home to save Alfred, when really...
He had no chance.
It was already done, well in advance, you know? So I thought that was also an interesting concept, because you hear the phone ringing in the background, and you think that Alfred's just ignoring the phone for some reason. But that's not the case. They're putting the sound over the clip of him. Yeah, it was I really liked how they did that scene. That was actually really good.
And it's funny because in you explaining the scene, granted we just saw the movie, but you explaining the scene, it sounded, if I hadn't seen the movie, I would have been confused. I'd have been like, wait, what do you mean it was over the what? But you said it, and I was like, no, that's exactly how it happened.
So what happens is he's driving home because he realizes that Alfred could be in trouble because he knows that the Riddler's going to kill Bruce Wayne. Right. So he's like, he doesn't necessarily know that Alfred will be in trouble, but he knows that there could be something dangerous there, whatever. So he's trying to go there, and he's calling and calling and calling, and you hear the phone ringing, like from the house, like not the phone tone that you would hear when you call somebody, but on the other side, like an older house phone ringing. So you hear that, and then you see Alfred sitting at a table, he's opening letters, and he's totally ignoring it. And what it is they're literally playing the audio of the phone ringing in real time over the flashback
of what he's doing.
Alfred looking through the mail and realizing or finding the bomb and whatnot. And then finally the phone gets picked up, and it's, I think, what was her name? The maid.
I can't remember. Yeah.
There's another woman, like a caretaker type character. I don't know if she's from the comics, at Wayne Manor, and she's the one that picks up the phone, and she's like, he said, I think there's something that bad might happen, and she's like, it already did.
Yeah.
So it's like an hour ago this bomb went off. And just as she answers, he's like under a bridge or something, and he comes out, and he can see Wayne Manor and see the smoke coming out.
Right. Yeah.
And then it pans out, and you see around her like the rubble and stuff. It was a well shot scene. It was like super confusing at first, even as you're watching it, and then you realize what happened.
And it's one of those like where it's surprise. It's not a jump surprise, but it's a surprise that all of a sudden just you're watching and you're just like, and your mind puts it together, and you're like, holy crap. As far as Alfred goes, that's another way to kind of stay a little consistent with our thoughts here. Yeah. Alfred gets obviously played by Andy Serkis, fantastic actor.
Such a waste of talent.
Wow. Yes, he was very underutilized in my opinion. I went into this movie again with all the expectations of it being this grand Batman movie. I almost said Spider-Man. Batman movie, and because of the stars that they had and the people that they, especially Andy Serkis, we didn't get a lot of Alfred. And the Alfred that we got was very much he wasn't the older, hey, well, Master Wayne, here's your breakfast. He was more of like, hey man, what do you got on the agenda today? So going into it with Andy Serkis on that side of things, I was like, this is gonna be great. Never really got to see hardly anything. He was like a correspondence. He kept opening the mail. He kept like saying, oh, you got this in the mail. I'm like, dude, come on.
Do you know what would be amazing?
What's that?
Is if they like literally took the scene from Nobody. We just watched Nobody the other night.
Oh yeah.
And had Christopher Lloyd play Alfred and blast somebody with a shotgun.
Andy Serkis gets put into the hospital, and he's there for the rest of the movie essentially. Bruce goes to visit him, and he pretty much is like, hey, no more bullshit. What is going on? What happened? Are my parents, who they were? Because Bruce this whole time was like, my parents were taken from me, and I want to be vengeance. I embody vengeance. And then he hears about his mom losing her mind and having a history of mental illness, his dad being this corrupt politician who apparently was also a doctor. We all know that he was a physical doctor, or a eternal medicine or whatever. But he was going off to be a mayor for some reason, which I don't remember that at all in any other source material. Of course, you would know less than me. They kind of made it seem like the Waynes were awful people for a good chunk of the movie.
I don't think so. So I guess we should just kind of start going into opinions because I'm gonna talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Kind of wrap it up. This might as well be a podcast at this point.
True.
We're pushing some time.
True.
So my overall thoughts on the movie, and the reason I'm saying that is because I had a lot to do with his parents looking bad. Acting was great. I can't think of any bad actors per se throughout the whole thing. Mm-hmm. The Riddler was probably the worst actor, but he wasn't particularly bad. It was like, at first, especially because you compared him to the Heath Ledger Joker, it was almost like a bad Heath Ledger impression.
I could
instead of it being its own character. So it could have been done a little bit better, but I feel like that wasn't so much the acting skill as much as how they wrote the character. Cinematography, no complaints for it. Batman's a horrible character in general, but it is what it is. The Riddler is an interesting villain to pick, and the concept's always been good. And they did it a little differently. The overall concept and the motive of the Riddler was good, except for later. It kind of derailed. So it started off strong. It's like, I want to expose all these elites that are bad people. Well, Thomas Wayne's also bad. And it almost was like he was reaching, like trying to make Thomas Wayne a bad person.
Like bloodthirsty.
It's not like he actually did anything. Yeah. And then it's like, he started, this is when it kind of, and I'm going to take a break in my explanation because this is exactly how the movie goes. The first hour and a half of the movie is about the Riddler's the villain. This is what we're worried about. And it takes a big break and talks about other nonsense and then goes back to the Riddler. Yeah. I was not a fan of that. It took a long break and was like, hey, this is the...
Well, it was focusing on Falcone and all that.
Yeah, but it was like... It just changed. It wasn't consistent. It was lazily done. It seemed like it was dragging on, and it made you almost forget the Riddler was even in the movie after a while. You're giving Batman, who already has so little depth, you're giving it a little more depth and a little more interest, and you're like, oh, well, his parents were bad. I think it would have been way cooler if they just rolled with that. And they were like, his parents were awful people, and now he turned around to be a good person, right?
Yeah.
That would have been amazing. And now he has this conflict, right?
Right.
Instead, they started hinting at his parents were bad. Hinting. I mean, they said his mom was crazy and that his dad was crooked. Mm-hmm. And then they just kind of slowly and then altogether retracted that and oh no, they were good people. They just trusted one wrong guy. Right. No, just stick. I think it would have been amazing to stick with it. Well, now the Riddler's like, well, I want to target Bruce Wayne because his dad was crooked, but he wasn't really. And the Riddler's a smart guy. He would probably know that he wasn't really crooked. So it was kind of reaching and a little far-fetched for me. And then he turns into blowing up the seawall and killing innocent civilians. It was like trying to force a big hero moment for Batman to save a bunch of people.
I agree with the last part of what you said pretty heavily. The blowing of the dam or whatever it was kind of that was kind of weird because those people obviously it just goes against his entire principle. Now as far as targeting
Bruce Wayne.
First Thomas Wayne.
Well, he never really targeted Thomas Wayne, but he's going after Bruce Wayne because of what Thomas Wayne did.
Right, and he's saying that sins of the father, the son will have to atone for, whatever. And the crazy thing is, I think his gripe with Thomas Wayne was that he had funded the orphanage, and then when he died tragically, not involving the Riddler at all.
I get what you're saying.
The funding was cut, and then he was like, "Well, what the hell? I was an orphan, and I lost everything." And
that makes sense because effectively that would be Bruce Wayne's fault.
Yeah,
and it would have. I think it's a good point, and I thought about this when we were watching too. It would have been cool to see character development in Bruce Wayne, and that both if that was Riddler's motive and the new mayor, the mayor-elect Rial, she even comments at that funeral where the guy's head was blown off. Mm-hmm. She makes a comment like, "Hey. Your father was really involved with all this charitable work and you haven't done anything. I'd like to change that." It would be cool at the end of the movie for him to come out as Bruce Wayne and start doing a lot of big charity work or open up a new orphanage.
Or even showing him,
Yeah, so even though he beat the Riddler and stopped the bad stuff, he's still doing the good thing that Riddler was trying, not really trying to do, but he's doing something effectively that he would have wanted that can maybe turn him around type thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Almost... I'm trying to think of a good comparison because they did that. Oh, I think Sam Wilson did that in Falcon and Winter Soldier. At the end, he talks. He does the big speech, right? And he's just trying to help everybody else out. He's not siding with the government, but he's also not siding with the flag smashers, right?
Right.
He's doing the in between. They have the right idea, and you need to listen to them. Obviously, they're doing it the wrong way. It would have been cool if Bruce Wayne did that same type of thing. Well, I want to help out, and of course. the Riddler wasn't trying to open up an orphanage or anything, so it's not quite the same. But like, if he's like, we need to help orphans, so this kind of thing doesn't happen.
He was just bitter.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been cool to see big character development for Bruce Wayne, in that let me start doing more charity work. You know, that's all I'm getting at.
Now a little bit, and I will. It's a little towards. Of course, it's the end of the movie. Bruce Wayne has a little bit of a, I don't want to say character development, but he kind of goes off of the, I'm just gonna beat the crap out of these bad people. And then I was a little bit confused because, all right, let's start from that beginning of that chunk.
Okay.
They are at essentially Madison Square Garden.
Gotham Square Garden.
Yeah. So he's essentially on the bridge at the very top or whatever.
Yeah.
And you find out that the Riddler is even more like Ledger's Joker, where he has this following because of social media. So he gets all these people to buy the mask that he wears and like saran wrap for their hair and like this whole thing, and then get rifles and get bullets and this and pretty much carry out my plan, because I'm at this point I know I'm going to be arrested or incapable of helping. So they're up there, they're about to snipe the mayor-elect and everyone else, and Batman shows up and does his thing, and then Catwoman shows up and she's like, okay, you know, I'm mad because my dad is Falcone, which I don't think that was ever that way in any of the previous. I don't know, maybe, who knows.
I mean,
it
made sense.
It made sense for the movie. Yeah, it made sense for the movie. But then, and I know if I had a clip, guys, of CJ's reaction to this, and believe me, he's gonna react when I bring it up. There's a scene where
shot?
Yes,
I actually like that.
I did too.
I don't know what reaction you're referring to.
Oh, because I heard I for some reason I remember you going, what? Like you were like, you kind of put your hands up like, what is this? You know, at one point, and I thought it was.
I don't think it was specifically that, because I actually liked that. I thought that was a cool concept. I was like, okay, you don't see that. At least I haven't seen that a lot.
Yeah.
And he almost had like.
He had a place to put it, like an
a specific
location,
spot. Yeah, it was like on his suit, and you just took it and injected it. I thought that was like, oh, like he's giving himself a second win. That's not the type of like thing you'd see in a character like that. Right. And it made sense, right? Like, he's not a superhero. He's getting his ass kicked, you know. In a lot of forms of like Batman, he would just kind of muscle through it. But this time he didn't. He needed that extra help. He used the adrenaline, pen, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, okay, so I stand corrected. I thought that your reaction was like, what? Because it was green, and I don't think adrenaline is green, so I was kind of confused.
It may not have been adrenaline, but that's effectively
what it was. Yes. And that's what I was waiting for you to be like, lean over and be like, what the hell just happened? I'm like, I think it's adrenaline. And honestly, I expected that. And so that happened.
I don't know what you saw me do that to.
I think your hand went up or something. I don't know. But
I think it was something like, oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, like literally just like, oh, yeah.
And then of course, he gets blasted in the chest. So before the adrenaline thing, he gets blasted in the chest by like a freaking a double barrel, and the guy reloads he's like looking at Batman hanging there in agony.
And he takes his time.
And he takes his time with like, dude, cracking the thing.
I wanted to say something, but I waited. He not only took his time reloading the gun and pointing it at him and pulling trigger. He never ends up pulling the trigger.
No.
But not only that, but he knows his suit's fucking bulletproof, and he aims it at the top of his head, which still probably would have done damage.
Yeah.
But like, the cowl's there. You could probably assume it's bulletproof. I would have put that shit right here and fired.
Or his eyes or something.
His eyes, right where and they have it like up here where it might. I think he got shot in the head a couple times. It's kind of hard. It's really fast. He did. Yeah. So it's like, you see this open face here. It may not kill him, but it's
I'd put it right up to his cheek.
It's gonna do some damage, right? Put that right, and I mean, he had time. Put it right on his face and blast it, or like you said, in his eyes, blind him or some shit like that. Like, that would have like done the job, and it just
didn't.
It's the villain like needlessly taking their time, and it wasn't the real Riddler. It was a random gun.
Yeah, it was a random dude.
So if it was like, usually it makes sense when it's a big villain and they're doing their exposition. They're like, so long, Batman, or nothing. No, he just literally just takes his time.
Yeah, it wasn't campy. It was like almost like it was in slow motion. And at one point,
the gunman was moving in slow motion, but nobody else.
And you knew, I thought maybe it was going to be Gordon. I thought maybe like some magical, like a pipe would break and it hit the guy in the head or something.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it turned out to be Catwoman. So she puts the guy on his ass and then realizes, holy crap, Batman is like hanging for, Batman has grappling hook, guys. Like, if Batman's ever hanging off a ledge and he has a shotgun to his face, sure, incapacitate the guy who's trying to shoot him. But don't try and pick him up and totally forget about the guy you just got off of him. Because that's what happened. She gets grabbed by the guy and he's like on top of her, overpowering her. And then that's when Batman does the whole adrenaline thing.
Yeah, that was after he was pretty beat up though, so
Yeah.
it made sense that he couldn't pull himself up quick. I didn't have a problem with that scene.
Yeah. My problem was what completely went after that. Not that it was an issue, but it was very confusing the way that they chose to do it.
That whole sign thing that was hanging down, the electricity.
So that whole thing, right? So they show that the electricity or whatever, and then I'm going, holy crap, everyone down there is getting electrocuted. That was not the case. No one got electrocuted. And then Batman looked at like the transformer box that was like hanging off a thread, and then decided to essentially swan dive off of that ledge he was hanging off of, and literally like backflop into the water.
We don't know why he did all that.
I to this moment,
okay.
I was super confused.
So my understanding of it, at least,
Okay.
right, is it was like this cable's hanging from the ceiling, and then it's got that big whatever it was on it, and it's sparking. It's super electric, but all these civilians are down on the ground, covered in water, and they're in like knee-deep water or something like that.
Of course, yeah.
So I think what the concern was that if it arcs too hard, or if it like drops a little bit but doesn't come unattached, it'll touch the water and it'll electrocute all the civilians there. So what he did was he drops it, grabs it, and cuts the wire, so there's no current running through the lower part that's falling.
Oh, okay.
And that way he's cutting off the current, and that way it won't touch the water. That's how I kind of understood it. I was like, oh, okay,
And then as it was happening, I'm like, okay, maybe he was too hurt to have a graceful landing to help the people, because eventually that's what he does. He helps the people are trapped underneath like stadium brackets and stuff, and they're kind of pinned down, and then he kind of moves it out of the way, and one by one, including the mayor-elect, pulls them out of this rubble. And I was super confused at that, because I was like, wait a second, dude, you just got shot in the chest point blank with a double barrel, and Catwoman pulls you up only for you to flop back down and go all the way down that way instead of like using a reverse grappling hook or something. Now,
I think the only thing that would have made sense is kind of the way I explained it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, why would he just grab that and he cuts it? Like, he's the one that drops himself.
Exactly. Again,
I think that had to be it. Is that he was worried it would electrocute them, so he cut off the current, and that big heavy part went into the water with him, and there was no current, so it wouldn't electrocute everybody.
And again, if you guys have opinions, thoughts, if you guys know, if you happen to be the man who wrote the scene, let us know what was going on there. Stop. No, don't stop. Another detail that you see it a few times, the actual bat on his chest is a weapon.
Yeah,
like
really cool.
That's his like glaive. It's like one giant bat.
I actually like that too.
I did too, because you actually like he uses it quite a bit. He uses flashlights, which is like I've never seen Batman use a flashlight in a movie before.
Well, in I haven't seen it, but I remember the trailer. I think it was Batman vs Superman. He has a headlamp.
Oh yeah, fair, yeah.
Which that was another thing I was going to get into is the costume overall. I never really delved into it. There's some bad Batman costumes out there. I didn't think this one was that bad.
Well, this one was very practical.
Yeah.
He was basically wearing a lot of plate armor and like bulletproof like side. He had pauldrons, which we never really got to see.
Yeah.
The iconic
gauntlet.
Batman gauntlets were not really there. He basically had like a EMP, or not EMP, like an electro charge where he can like has like a taser, but it didn't have like the what he uses to block out.
Anyways.
I'm a big fan of those. I like it because Batman uses it as like the Spartans used it to block like weapons or bladed weapons and melee weapons and stuff. But the fighting was phenomenal, as we touched on. Of course, we're getting to the end of this episode, and we're also getting pretty much to the end of the movie. Yeah. But he has a dialogue after he pulls out the mayor and everything. They show him. At first, I thought it was a significant moment because I didn't know who this victim was, but she was put on a stretcher and like life lighted out, and like she didn't let him go.
Was she significant?
I don't think she was, but it kind of made they had a moment there.
What I think happened was, and it was all undertones is what you had to pick up on.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about her as being part of it until you mentioned it. But I think one of the undertones they failed to really address more directly was that the public didn't really see Batman as a hero until the end.
Till the very end, yeah.
And when he had his big hero moment, which, like I said before, I think was forced. Like, that was unnecessary. Didn't make any sense. Even the mayor at the end, when he first tries to grab hands to help him out, the mayor doesn't do it, which doesn't really make sense. Someone is trying to pull you up. But I guess if they didn't see him as a hero, it makes more sense.
And the boy
is the first one. He reaches out. He says, okay. And as soon as he does, then the mayor comes, and then everybody else follows. After he saves everybody, after the whole thing's over, basically, the National Guard comes in there, lifting the injured out, and they lift this random woman, and she's on a stretcher, and she doesn't want to get tied down, and she grabs onto him, and they have their moment, like you said.
Batman was narrating a lot. Like in the very beginning, it kind of felt like Rorschach. He was like, a comedian died in New York City. Like it was a lot like that.
He was
No, that was Rorschach.
did
That
a-
wasn't
yeah.
that wasn't Batman.
Robert Pattinson did a decent job.
He did.
For as intolerable as a character Batman is, Robert Pattinson.
You gonna make me
made
spit
him
orange juice all over the camera.
A little more palatable. Best Batman in my opinion.
Yes,
Best-
and I think we'll end it with that.
The actor. The movie. I mean, I haven't seen them all. I think The Dark Knight. I'm not gonna say it was a good movie, but it was better.
Okay, well, I mean, if it takes a bad Batman movie, or in your opinion, a worse Batman movie for you to appreciate The Dark Knight, I think that's a win. So, The Dark Knight, obviously, especially a lot of you watching, Dark Knight's probably regarded as one of the best, if not the best Batman movie of all time. This movie is actually being...
low bar.
This movie is actually being compared to that a lot. Online and on social media, a lot of people are holding this up as a way of getting their point across, a way of getting their review across. Like, hey, if you like The Dark Knight, you're going to really love this. I don't know where I stand on that yet. I think I'd have to watch this movie at least one more time to kind of make that comparison.
Well, I'll also say that was definitely my opinion at first, was that it was okay. It was not a bad movie for a bad character, but it was worse than The Dark Knight, but Robert Pattinson was better than Christian Bale.
Okay,
That's basically what I was getting at. But, I mean, all the acting I think was better than that one, except for, I mean, Heath Ledger's a great actor.
Yeah.
I don't think it best portrayed that character personally. I think Joaquin Phoenix is a better Joker than Heath Ledger, but Heath Ledger may be a better actor and acted better in that movie, if that makes sense. I think Joaquin Phoenix was more true to the character, is all I'm getting at.
Well, we can talk about that in another video, because the Joker, we can talk about the big three.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as
Jack Nicholson, is that the third one? Yeah.
So as far as this movie goes, overall, it's a great movie to watch. I think it comes together well. It was not hard to follow. It was not confusing by any means in a broad stroke.
No.
It's maybe not rewatchable. I'm gonna rewatch it because I want to provide a better review and a better grasp of it. Which is probably why I'm not going to rate it 1 to 10. I don't think that's fair because we're probably really tired. We've been up for a long time. 1 to 10. You can?
Yeah. For a movie, five. For a Batman movie,
I'm afraid
it has no comparison. What would we say is a middle ground for a Batman movie?
Middle ground would
what is
probably
the most
be
average Batman movie in your opinion?
Average, probably Batman Begins.
So that would probably be a 5.
Batman Begins would be a 6.
For a Batman movie.
For a Batman movie, it would be a 6. It was still
so where would you put Dark Knight in comparison to that? Because I haven't seen Batman Begins.
The Dark Knight?
Yeah.
A 10.
As a Batman movie, this is probably an 8.
Okay.
I would say that. So if you like Batman, you'll like this movie, I think.
But based off of as a Batman movie, this is going to be probably top 2, top 3. Definitely top 3.
Yeah. If anything's above it, from what I understand, it's just Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, if anything.
Well, Dark Knight Rises is kind of like, yes, it's its own movie, but it's kind of hard. It's kind of like comparing the Jokers. Okay, we're not getting into that. Anyway, you guys get out and see this movie. If you're a Batman fan, really go see it. If you're a Robert Pattinson fan, you have to see it.
I thought that watching this movie, that's all I would be able to think about is Twilight, and unfortunately, that's not the case.
Well, then it's a win.
It was more palatable than I thought it would be.
It's a win then, because when we were sitting down and you were eating your first bites of popcorn, you were like, are you ready for a Batman movie? I'm ready for Batman to sparkle. And I was like, fair. Like, we were making fun of it like anyone was. But I mean, this movie definitely met my expectations. I kind of set them a little high going into it because of all the reviews. I kept telling them, I'm like, hey, want to see it early. I want to get ahead of the YouTube algorithm and get out there and talk about this movie and generate, interest in it. I enjoyed it. I know you said you were, it was okay movie and stuff coming out of the theater. You've been having a little bit of a moment to think about it. I don't want you to change your mind.
It was too long of a movie.
Okay.
If they cut an hour out of that movie, which they could have.
They could have. I think so.
It would have been, I'd say, a better movie. That was my biggest issue, was that it dragged on a little too long.
Yeah.
I think what they should have done was focus on the Riddler, and that whole big break they took away from it kind of cut away, and bring it back in. Or if you're going to do that, they need to do more character development for the main character,
Right.
instead of having Two-Face, one thing that would have got me excited because I like the movie is if you put Joaquin Phoenix in there, even for just a cameo.
Yeah, we thought that it was, or you had said, is that Jared Leto? And I was like, God, I hope not.
I thought it sounded like Jared
it did.
Leto.
Once you said it, I was like, oh God, it might be him. And I was getting ready to give this movie a negative review. If they chose to bring back
Jared Leto
as a Joker, I was gonna get up and leave. I cannot stand him.
To be fair, Jared Leto, I think, is in the like Justice League universe, right?
He is.
Effectively.
Yeah.
Because
they confirmed it with the Snyder Cut. He's at the very end.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So Jared
he's a lot
Leto's
less annoying, but...
So he shouldn't be in this one because it's a separate Batman.
Well, remember, going into it, I didn't realize until you kind of said it that it was just saying, hey, DC's got all this coming out. Come see our movie. Come give us money.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was like Ben Affleck was Batman.
You thought watching that was saying this is our universe that they all tie together.
Yeah, like Ben Affleck stepped down as Batman, and then like now Robert Pattinson's gonna be the new new Batman.
Like they're just recasting it.
But yeah. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. The movie, definitely I recommend seeing it. CJ, what do you think? Okay, CJ says
If you like DC and Batman, which I don't know why you would, go ahead and watch it.
So I'm gonna have a fun time editing this before tomorrow because it is now what time?
It is
1:52 in the morning. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.